By the time I had exited my company, I sold 500 million earplugs and also a omni-channel distribution channel that had over 30,000 stores of distribution.
Welcome to a new episode of the DefDevice podcast. Today I have Mr. Doug Pick with me. Welcome, Doug.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Dano.
Yeah, thanks for joining. We met on a Zoom call, I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, and I was so impressed with what you're doing. I thought this guy needs to be on my podcast. So let us know, what are you doing these days?
Well, leveraging my nearly 3 decades as a consumer packaged goods founder, CEO, financier, that took a company from its basically beginnings to all the way through over 26 years to the exit to a private equity, a multi-billion-dollar private equity group. I have started simply DougPick.com, and that is designed to help up and coming, emerging, and more advanced consumer packaged goods that could value my assistance across all levels of their company. So everything from product development, packaging, sales, marketing, promotion, publicity, social media. And then really my superpower is omni-channel distribution with a primary focus on the national retailers. And really it's as a result of working to support the category managers at all the major food, drug, and mass retailers from Walmart, Target, Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, Albertsons, Kroger, and the list goes on and on. By the time I had exited my company, I sold 500 million earplugs and also a omni-channel distribution channel that had over 30,000 stores of distribution. So it was a pretty fantastic business. And now I'm looking to help provide that guidance that consumer packaged goods founders and those that are already in the space could use to help them avoid pitfalls and really build massive enterprise value.
There you go. So now the listeners will know why I was so intrigued by having you on my podcast, because this is a very unique story. And you told me how persistent you were to kind of approach all these stores like Walmart. I think you spent you kept on going for years to actually get your stuff into Walmart, and I think that is really admirable. So persistence is definitely a part of your magic sauce, I guess.
For sure. Persistence. I don't hear the word no. So that even though I was in the space of earplugs, I actually used my earplugs for a lot of those sales calls. And that's really said in jest. But really, when it comes to business, you cannot hear the word no if you're on a mission. You have to persevere, and you have to bring your A game and understand that there was a sales rep of mine once. He gave me some beautiful advice. He said, once I hear the word no, that's when the selling begins. It's a great line. I've never forgot it. And really it applies to my journey, because bear in mind, for your listeners and viewers, I started a brand called Heroes, which we spelled H-E-A-R, like I hear you, O-S. And you can go to heroes.com to see all the products and packages that I built over the 26 years that I ran the company. But the thing is that started with just an idea. And my first sale was for $32.40. And that was like the propulsion, and that was the confidence to just keep going and going. So for perspective, my earplugs were sold and targeted towards food, drug, and mass retailers. And it took 4 years to land Walgreens. And that was when they had just 1,800 stores. Then I had to wait another 4 years to land Walmart. So that's 8 years in the space. Then 9 years Target, 12 years for Rite Aid, and 15 years for CVS. And it was even though it was a small niche in the what I called us, we were the granule of sand on the retail beach because our niche of earplugs was so minuscule. But there was very tough competition, and then in time we actually ran into competition with our customers because after about the 2008-2009 financial collapse, all the retailers in really one fell swoop moved into store brand, and store brand became their most popular means by which they wanted to distribute product. And the reason why they did that is because when retailers move to store brand, they pick up about 20 to 30 to 40 points of gross margin. And retailers are all about profitability, as they should be. So that necessitated a pivot from my company that was just national brand as a distributor to actually taking my saved pennies and investing $3 million into a manufacturing company that would support innovation in the space, as well as economies of scale. Because as a distributor of 3M earplugs, I had no access to economies of scale. So I ultimately built a state-of-the-art earplug manufacturing facility capable of producing 120 million earplugs a year in Mexico. It was quite a journey.
Boy, I never heard of an entrepreneur who actually built his own factory. I mean, that is a whole different level of building your business. I was selling wireless chargers at some point on Amazon, and having my own factory would have been quite cool, but I didn't go all the way, and I'm fascinated by how you did it. And yeah, so that is so cool. And this also stirs my curiosity about Doug, how he became the Doug he is today. And as you know, and as our viewers and listeners know, this is all about your life story, how
Sure.
you became the Doug of 2024.
Yeah.
So let's take the time machine and go back to 10-year-old Doug and see what he was doing and what was on his mind and how he became the Doug you are today.
Yeah, it's very interesting when I reflect back on my life, and I've had many times like these where I'm like, how did I become the guy that I am today? I really pinpoint a formative moment that occurred around the time I was 9 or 10. I was in 4th grade, and my parents had just separated. And I remember very clearly walking into my home after school. For whatever reason, my brother and sister were not home. And I opened the front door only to kind of hear my mom crying on the phone. And I was like, that's unusual. So I made my way into the kitchen where she was sitting, and she was on the phone. And as it turns out, she was speaking with my dad. And in that moment, I'm watching my mother cry, and she hangs up the phone with my dad. And she tells me that as a result of their separation and my father temporarily losing his job as a doctor, believe it or not, that we were going to have to sell the house, and my mom was going to have to get a full-time job. And for whatever reason, that just freaked me out. And I remember running into my room, crying, jumping on my bed, and making a declaration to myself that my future family would never have to experience the type of sadness and pain that I did. And so as a result of that, in that moment, I think there was a switch that occurred that all of a sudden turned the happy-go-lucky Doug into a very business-focused, I'm going to make a lot of money on this planet. And I equated money with happiness. And I think a lot of people do that. You may come across that. You may come across the subject as we get further into the discussion. But what I realized once I started my company and it started to accelerate and I started to develop savings and I was really starting to make a lot of money. I also remember the moment where I said to myself, it's great to be able to deposit $100,000 in the bank, but that doesn't make me happy. And so it was a great life lesson. And it all started really with just a very sad young boy who not only was scared about what was going to happen to my world at that time, but also just I missed my father. Mm-hmm. And that was, as far as the separation goes, and ultimately their divorce, it rocked my world, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So this traumatic experience actually happened at this age of 9 or 10, mm-hmm. where your life completely changed. I can only imagine the pain that was involved in that. This is one of the reasons I do this podcast, because you never know, it's such a fascinating story to hear how you actually, from this particular experience, you set your mind to be a successful business owner and make a lot of money. And it worked out. So you
I got lucky. Yeah, I got lucky. Yeah. And I would say something else is kind of like reflective of that time. So maybe a couple years later, somehow or another, my grandmother persuaded me that I should get a paper route. Probably a lot of listeners don't even know what a paper route is.
Including me.
So I actually, she persuaded me to get a job at the age of 12, delivering papers to people's homes. And in Los Angeles, there's the LA Times. And at one point, there was also something called the Daily News. Well, I got a job at 12 delivering newspapers in my local home area. And that created more difficulty and shame for me, because I did not have the ability to have any sleepovers at friends, because the newspapers need to be delivered 7 days a week. And also I had to get up at like 3:34 in the morning in order to fold and prepare the newspapers, in order to put them in my bag, in order to load them on my bike, and then go out in the dark delivering newspapers. And it was difficult. But I will say this, I believe that my family has great genes, and both of my grandfathers were entrepreneurs. And that experience was also, it ended up in reflection a positive one, because it was kind of like the route itself was my own little business. Mm-hmm. So not only did I deliver the newspapers, but for the Daily News, I actually had to collect the subscription dollars for everyone that subscribed to the paper. So I'd have to go to people's homes in like the afternoons and collect the $5 or $6 a month, whatever it was, and then turn that in. And it turns out that I actually won an award for like one of the best newspaper delivery boys of that time. Again, it's just in business, and I'll extrapolate it out even more, which is in business, you have to bring your A game. A+ work is the only thing that you can deliver. That's the only acceptable grade that someone should deliver in the workforce. And that's part of what I brought in that simple job. So it was great, all in all.
There's something else we have in common. I was also a paper delivery boy, even though the word paper route was not in my vocabulary. I was in Cologne at that time in Germany. But yeah, right. that's and at a very similar age, I was also bringing newspapers to people. So there you go. Yeah. So that was your first business, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was your next business?
My next business, one of the things about that formative moment, it kind of just pushed me to think about opportunity and to ask questions and to be very curious. My mother used to refer to me as Curious George. That's another thing in life, which is I'm not afraid to approach anyone at any time to ask any question, as long as I think it makes sense. And so my next business, because I love cars, was being, pardon me, a car detailer. So when I was 16, I loved cleaning my car, and I was like, well, I'm pretty good at it. So
you had a car age 16?
Yeah. Yep.
What? Is that even legal?
Well, it was at the time. Yeah.
All right.
And so I washed and detailed cars, and that was good. It was good paying opportunity. And then ultimately I got jobs in telemarketing when telemarketing was really big for sales. I excelled at that. Because again, I have this mindset of, I really don't care if anyone says no, because that just means I'm one step closer to a yes. And I also know that life is about the numbers game. You have to do the numbers and not be concerned with how many numbers, because you never know when you're going to hit it. And that's just part of hard work. You just got to work. And through that hard work, the universe generally rewards those that work hard. So I did that. I worked as a recruiter for a wonderful entrepreneur. And ultimately, again, tying back to, I'm trying to think of ways to make money. When I was 13, for my birthday, I got a 35 millimeter camera. And at that time, my sister happened to walk in my bedroom, and she passed me a single. So for those out there, this was a record, a 45 size record. And it was for this new band called Motley Crue. And so my friend, Stephen Perkins, who would later become the drummer of the world famous band Jane's Addiction, he and I put on this record for Motley Crue, and we were blown away. So we found out that on December 25th, 1981, Motley Crue was playing at the Country Club in Reseda, California. We saw them, and I knew at that moment these guys were destined for huge success. So with that business mind clicking, I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I'll take pictures of these guys. And so I started taking pictures of them and engaging with their manager. And I became friendly with Nikki Sixx through my sister, who happened to know his girlfriend at the time. And I made a deal with Nikki, which was he saw my pictures. He was blown away. And he said, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you a photo pass for every one of our shows. All you have to do is let me see your pictures afterwards. And I said, you got it. So I was 13 at the time. 13. I was 13. Yeah. And so, so I started to take pictures. And then, as it turns out, 4 of my pictures are on their Decade of Decadence album. And that led ultimately to my engagement with Motley Crue, and this idea of taking pictures to potentially sell them led to my becoming just fascinated and enamored with the music industry. So when I went to USC, University of Southern California in Los Angeles, I had a sole mindset of becoming a record industry entrepreneur. And I got very lucky. As being in the USC Entrepreneur Program, I participated in their 1-year program. And in order to graduate, you had to write a business plan on your own company. And I wanted to have my own record company. So I wrote 50 letters to executives in Los Angeles requesting to meet them. Well, it turns out 49 of the 50 letters were sent to the personnel department. None of the executives read the letter. And I got all these letters back that said, thank you so much for your resume and submission. We currently don't have any jobs, but we'll keep your information on file. And I would call back and say, I wasn't looking for a job. I just wanted to talk to so-and-so so I could get information about being in the music business. Well, it turns out my mother called me shortly after all these letters went out, and she said, Doug, I've got a letter here from A&M Records. Do you want me to open it? I was in school at the time, trying to graduate. And I said, no, just hang on to it. I'll take a look at it when I get home on the weekend. Because I said it's just another one of those rejection letters. Well, I get home and I open it up, and it's from the executive assistant to the chairman of the board and co-founder of A&M Records, Jerry Moss. And she said in that note to me, she said, Mr. Moss would like to meet you. So I ended up meeting Jerry Moss, the guy that signed the Carpenters, the Police, Janet Jackson, Bryan Adams, Joe Cocker.
Wow.
This was the guy, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of the record industry. And the setup of the meeting was that I was to interview him. So I did. It was just a few days after I graduated college. And he said, at the end of the interview, he goes, so what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm looking for a job in the music industry. And he said, well, how would you like to work here? And I said, I'd love to. So that led to the job at A&M. I can go on from there about how I ultimately started my company, but I'll leave it up to you. I think I've been rambling a little bit too much.
No, man, there's no rambling here. This is fascinating. So the first thing, so you did, after school, you did go to university. So you did take this next step of, okay. And then you got fascinated with the record industry. And again, I can relate to that a lot, because one of my first things when I finished school, first thing I did was to study jazz saxophone. And then I became a sound engineer. So, and then I became a DJ. So there is some common ground here. I can relate to your fascination with music, and also back in the days when there was vinyl, and there was this 45 single stuff and all that. Yeah, I still have 500 plus records sitting in Munich somewhere in my closet. But I didn't bring them here. Wow. So you became an employee of this world-renowned record music company.
Yep.
And so that was like your first employee journey working for this. And then at some point you became the earplug guy. So what was the middle part between those two?
Well, what happened was right before I got the job at A&M Records. So Jerry said, how would you like to work here? And then he started creating interviews for me with his top brass. The process actually took 4 months. And in between the time that we started and I got the job, I needed to get a job. So I worked at a car dealership in Encino, California. And I was doing telemarketing sales, trying to bring people in to buy Jaguars and Range Rovers. And I was very successful at doing it. I happened to meet one of the clients of the dealership, and I told him, I'm interested to be in the music business. He goes, oh, well, I've got something special for you. And I go, what's that? He goes, well, I know of a rap group of 9-year-old twin black rappers, and they're amazing. And then again, so that bell went off like ding, 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 business opportunity. And so I started managing this rap group act. And through that,
9-year-old
9-year-old twin black rappers. This was at a time when, if you happen to remember the song Jump by, I forget the group, Crisscross was hitting, and Jump was big. And I was like, well, these guys could be even bigger. So I actually was able to network through A&M Records and the people that I knew there to land a production deal. It was called a demo deal with A&M Records. I secured Africa Islam, who was Ice-T's producer. And then there was another writer producer that worked with Africa, who I thought was insanely talented. Great personality, could write, rap, sing, produce. And so I asked him if I could manage him as well. And I ended up leaving my job at A&M Records after 2.5 years in order to manage this gentleman. And it just turns out that he wasn't as focused on his career as I was on his career, because I wanted major success. This was also at a time when MC Hammer was the biggest recording artist of the time, and rap was just huge, Vanilla Ice and all that. I mean, rap has only gotten bigger and bigger, but it was this beginning of rap. So while I started to see that this artist wasn't going to be my pathway to success, I just started researching different businesses. And my brother had introduced me to the use of earplugs for sleeping. And then I started to use them to sleep, as well as at all these concerts I went to as a result of working at A&M Records, because we were located in Hollywood and all the new acts would have shows. So I would go, I would take pictures, and I would wear earplugs. But when I left the company to manage the rap artists, and that didn't work out, I thought, well, maybe this was at a time, again, for your viewers and listeners, there were things called record stores. and there still are today, but not to the extent that they were. Like, for example, there were brands like Tower Records, Sam Goody, Musicland, Virgin. The Virgin Megastore was a worldwide record store in a sense, and they were a thing to go to. They also were the distribution point for concert ticket sales. So my concept with these earplugs was, I thought, well, maybe I can get Ticketmaster, who had all these relationships with Tower Records and Musicland, Sam Goody, to buy my earplugs for their concert goers. Well, that was the basic thrust forward of the Heroes original distribution channel idea. And also, to give you an idea how poor I was at projecting sales, for year one in my business plan, I projected that I would sell 10 million pairs of earplugs in year one. It would take me about 15 years in order to do that in a single year. But that's how optimistic I was. So that was the basis. But the thing about the earplugs that was very compelling to me was it was a space where the need for noise reduction, hearing protection, water protection is never going to go away. And because there were manufacturers that existed in the earplug space, because I only had $15,000 in savings, I didn't have to build a factory, because there were factories, and primarily those factories were set up to support industrial consumers or buyers of earplugs, like the Ford Motor Company, General Motors, Boeing, construction sites. And the consumer market was kind of like, we don't really care about that because the volume is so low. And I was like, well, that's my opening. And so I love the fact that there were so many different verticals that I could sell my earplugs in. Basically anywhere product was sold, I believed earplugs could be sold. And I proved that to be true across everything from, I mentioned the food, drug, and mass retailers, as well as surf shops, motorcycle stores, even convenience stores, and what else did we sell? We had so many different distribution points that we sold them on. So it was just the thing that I also loved about the business is it was a great outlet for my creativity, because it was just like, oh, where else can I think about selling these earplugs? And the other thing that was great about supporting the creativity is that I had designed a basic package, and for very inexpensive dollars, let's just call it $250, I could create an entirely new line of product just by changing the graphics of the blister card. And that led to me really expanding out the line, rapidly once I had product market fit. And, again, selling to all the major retailers and then being the first one to sell on Amazon.
The first one to sell on Amazon. Wow.
The first among the first earplug suppliers to sell all of our products on Amazon. The story behind that's kind of interesting, which is we had a direct consumer site with Heroes, and Amazon at the time was really just a book reseller. And then we started to hear about.
What year was that?
I think it was close. Don't hold me to it, but I think it was close to about 2007. So let's just call it 17 years.
That's very early. Yeah.
So 2007, I get a call from this director of purchasing for Amazon. And normally when we presented lines of our product to a prospective buyer at any of the major chains, they didn't want our entire line. We had at the time maybe 12 different items. And we would only go in with our 4 best sellers because there was only so much retail space. Well, we didn't know what was Jeff Bezos's master plan, but the director of purchasing said to me at that time, he goes, I want every single product your company makes. And I kind of walked him back. I was like, are you sure? Because, we have 4 wonderful top sellers that you can start with. He's like, no, I want everything. Little did we know was that those were the foundational moves for Amazon to become the everything store, the A to Z of everything being sold. And that's what they did with us. Obviously many of the products did not really make it through their vendor central sales, but it was kind of neat that we didn't know what was happening. But in hindsight, I clearly saw that was the beginning of what Bezos had planned.
So you got approached by Amazon. Holy cow. Not many people are lucky enough to be approached by Amazon and be asked if we would like to sell on their platform. And of course, things have changed since 2007 dramatically. But again, you have been witnessing like these very early stages of the e-commerce world. And you went through all these challenges and you have gathered so much experience, not only online, but also offline. So I think if somebody wants to succeed in e-commerce and expand into retail stores, Mr. Doug is the one to talk to.
I'd welcome that.
Yeah, and I will make sure that all the details will be in the description under this video. So if you want to reach out to Doug, you will know how to find him. And as a closing word, Mr. Doug, after this amazing session, and thank you to all our listeners who are still with us at this time, I would like to reward you with the nugget of wisdom from Mr. Doug, who will share with us, what is the one thing that he would tell 10-year-old Doug today? What would be this kind of entrepreneurial advice that you would give to yourself or to other entrepreneurs who want to start their business today?
It's a great question. I think that, the entrepreneurial Doug in that moment didn't know that he was set to be an entrepreneur. What I would have given guidance at that time would have been 2 things. I would have done 2 things for what I'll call little Doug. The first was I would have given him a hug and I would have wiped the tears from his eyes. And then I would have told him, don't worry, everything is going to be all right.
Wow. Oh yeah. Everything is going to be all right. I relate to that one. That's fantastic. Yeah. I also had this notion in my mind where I wanted to go back to 10-year-old Dano and give him a hug and to say, dude, I know these are tough times, but you will be okay. And I think that's a wonderful piece of advice, to go back and to actually embrace the child version of ourselves and our, people say that this kid of ours is still within us somewhere, somehow. And it really matters how we treat this inner child, so to say, and to set intention to actually give it a hug and share the love. I think that's a wonderful advice.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Doug, that was really exciting. I'm having goosebumps right now. And I would like to say thank you so much for joining us. And again, if people want to reach out to you, we'll make sure they can.
Sounds great.
Let's see how this life journey continues.
Sounds great, Dano. So great to be on your podcast, and thank you for having me.